Hello, everybody. I am Zachary Trent, game designer, co-creator of Everyday Heroes, maestro of mathematics at Sig Trent Games. Today, I'm going to update you on what's going on with Sig Trent Games this week, number 26. I'll offer you a little bit of game design advice, and we'll talk about my life and gaming this week. So, what's going on with Sig Trent Games? First of all, Shotgun Fantasy. We have inspiration galore. This was actually a contribution from my lovely wife, Anne, who did some research for me on examples of different kinds of isekai worlds and stories, going all the way back to ancient religious texts and all the way to the modern day anime and everything in between. So we've got a lot of different kinds of inspiration for you in the book to illustrate different ideas that I talk about in the isekai play section so that you can go up and look for examples and find inspiration for your games. I think she overwrote this project in any way. She got more examples than I even needed and gave a little synopsis of the plot of each one. And so that's all great stuff. So we'll put all that in the book to start with. We may trim some of them down because I got more entries than I need. I'm trying to do about 3 entries per idea, but it's really good stuff, and I'm really excited to have it in there. And that made it very easy to reach my word goal for this week. So thank you, darling. Also, I worked on equipment packs. It's pretty traditional in Everyday Heroes, and I think very useful in Shotgun Fantasy to have little packs of equipment that you can quickly equip your characters. I'm thinking a fair bit about what are the typical things that an adventuring dungeon character wants to have, and also kind of what's a realistic amount of bulk for these guys, and the stuff that you have. I don't want to have Shotgun Fantasy to have a detailed equipment list of a rope and a lantern and a torch, and I've got 4 torches and 1 flint and steel and all that kind of stuff. I want to have that available to you, but I don't want you to have to think real hard about what stuff you're going to include for your character. So little packs make it kind of quick and easy to put that together, because the idea here is to get to the cross-genre play. Now, equipment can be kind of important because the stuff that you're bringing from, let's say, a more high technology world into another world might be kind of interesting. Your cell phone gadgets, other electronic devices are interesting when you're in the fantasy world, but all that's covered in the core rule books and such. So we don't really need it in Shotgun Fantasy. Bringing items from a more archaic fantasy world into a modern world, not really super interesting most of the time. I mean, you could make a torch or, a primitive stick or whatever. So that doesn't really make a lot of sense. So you're going to keep those kind of simple. But it's fun working on them. It is an interesting design goal to try and get down to the essence of a thing just enough that you can play, but not so much that you're kind of wasting time and space. Playtest is up and running. Yay, I promised it for sure last week, and indeed, that's because it was almost done. And so I got that up and out to folks if you want to do some of the playtesting for Shotgun Fantasy. It is on our Discord, so just go over there and check the box that says you want to see that playtest material when you sign up for the Discord. Or if you're already on our Discord, just pop up, say something, let me know that you're interested in it, and you will get to see those documents. Right now, there's just one big doc that's got pretty much everything you need to make fantasy heroes for Shotgun Fantasy. So it's got the classes and the background and profession and some gear and a lot of spells and all the things that you need to make some characters. So the goal here is to see if the character options are sufficient for sort of very basic fantasy play and for making characters who are going to do crossover, and also to see if the magic system is fun to play with and interesting to you guys and all that kind of stuff. I only have 1 survey up right now, and it is about the 4 origin options that are in there, which are elves, dwarves, humans, and orcs right now. And that's probably the only 4 that are going to be in there, unless people are like, no, we have to have halflings / hobbits in there. I'm kind of leaning against those because I think they're sort of small humans for the most part, right? So not as interesting to me mechanically, but we'll see what we do with all that. It usually comes down more to culture for them, and in Everyday Heroes, Origins a little bit more just sort of like your genetic heritage almost, right? It's not about the culture because anybody can grow up in any different culture, so on and so forth. So that's what we got up there right now. Please check it out. I will have more surveys up this week. That's one of my goals for this week. What else we got? We got a new mailing list. Now, I haven't started mailing anybody on the mailing list because I think only Ann and I signed up for it so far. But if you would like to get notified about stuff for Sig Trent Games or Shotgun Fantasy, then we will have a link in the show notes for this show, and we will be publicizing that link and all around the internet in the next few days to try and get people who are interested in it to get the latest news, and so we can reach out to you with things like information about the playtest and so forth, and when we actually start to pre-sell, and then when we go on sale, and so on and so on. So I promise I won't spam you. I hate spam. I don't like getting a lot of emails from companies, maybe like once a month, something along those lines. And it'll be sort of irregular. So when we have something important to say, then we will send something out to folks who we think might be interested in that. So eventually, maybe we can, if we have multiple products and things like that in the future, we'll make it so the mailing list, you only get the stuff that you're interested in. Right now, it's just very simple. We have a list of emails. We send out emails. But, as the audience grows, that'll get a little bit more complex. But we're never going to spam people or fill your box with a lot of junk that you don't need. All right. Oracle project. So this is kind of a little side thing that I'm doing with a friend of mine who's a software developer. And was interested in trying to help him out with it, and just to do a little collaboration with my friends, because that's part of what Sigtrent Games is about. So I worked on that a little bit. I haven't been spending very much time on that project. Right now it's in the early, just kind of batting around ideas stage. And the idea was he wants to do some software development in conjunction with me, doing some game design. The thing that sparked his interest the most was solo role-playing, but actually the design that we're starting to come up with is a little bit more like a small group role-playing without a game master. Generally, those systems are these days called oracles. I have learned through research that Anne did and that I've done a little bit of as well. And so the oracle provides randomization elements or tells you the story or gives you instructions on play, and then you do some of the play yourself. And as we talked about kind of how we might want it to work, it shifted in the direction of a little bit of a sort of a choose-your-way adventure game that doesn't have a lot of tactical combat, but does include some theater of the mind style tactical combat. So it's kind of a hybrid. We don't want it to feel like a computer game. It needs to feel like a role-playing game. But the only materials that you really need to play is the app, your cell phone. And the idea is you can either play by yourself, or you can play with a group of up to 4 different people who are experiencing the same story together, making choices in the role-playing game, doing kind of traditional RPG combat, and how to do all that with just very simple user interface. It's pretty interesting, and to make it replayable, we have a lot of requirements. How we're going to meet with those requirements, I'm not sure. But this week what I did is I wrote up an example of play, which is essentially a little storytelling about me describing myself playing this game that is entirely in my imagination, right? And how it would work, what kind of things I have to do to log in. We often call these in the game design space or in the user interface design space user stories. So it's a story of how the user uses and interacts with the system. But in this case, it's also sort of a story of play, and it gives examples of what an adventure might feel like and the kinds of challenges somebody would be posted with. And also, in this case specifically, my friend Luis was interested in what the user interface might look like. So I imagined how the gameplay would go and what kind of a user interface would support that. And so I described that in there. Anyway, that was kind of a fun little bit of game design challenge. I don't know if we're going to go very far with that. Like I said, still in the experimentation phase, but it's always nice to collaborate with other people. So I'm always looking to do that. Speaking of which, I might have a new opportunity. One of the things we do at Sigtrent Games is to do freelance work for the companies. And so I've got a little nibble for that, which is pretty exciting. I'll talk about it more as it develops. Right now, there's not really much to say other than kind of some cool, potentially promising income for the company and for yours truly. So look forward to that. All right, what is our game design tip of the week? This week it is about replayability. Now I struggled to try and think of what to do for a game design tip of the week this week, since I didn't do a lot of game design outside of the Oracle thing and making equipment packs. And I just couldn't think of anything interesting to talk about that I haven't already talked about on that subject. And then I thought about, well, what if I did some game design advice that I've done before, but I do it a little differently? And that got me to the idea of replayability. So here we are. I was like, oh yeah, that's good. I can talk about that a little bit. So the focus here is, what are the elements that make a game replayable? Now with role-playing games, you're going to find a lot of these things are just baked into the role-playing game format. Role-playing games are infinitely replayable for the most part. Now, role-playing game adventures might not be infinitely replayable. In fact, many people feel like I don't ever want to play the same RPG tabletop adventure at the same time. But I've actually replayed a lot of stuff doing organized play, or just, when I'm running as a game master, you run the same adventure many times. So it is replayable for the game master, certainly. But I've also played in the things that I've mastered and done playtesting where we play the same adventure multiple times with different characters. So there is a fair amount of replayability. Anyway, let's go on and talk about the elements that make a game replayable. First of all, progressive challenges. And so when you think about this, you mostly think about computer games. So you have a difficulty setting when you come in. You can say, I want it in story mode where it's going to be super easy, but I'm just going to go through the story, or a super hardcore mode where if you fail in any way or you die, you have to start the game over from the very beginning, just like old school video games. So, and you'll find those in lots of different kinds of games. It's most commonly found in the role-playing games because some people are there for the story and not the strategy, and other people are there for the strategy and a little less the story. But at any rate, difficulty ratings, good way to have progressive challenge. Another is just graduated scoring. So old school video games, you had a score, and each thing you did was worth a certain number of points, and the higher the score you get, the better you do. People will play the game again and again and again to try and get a better and better score. This is the same thing that people add to games when they do their own time trial challenges and they do speed runs and things like that. People are adding replayability to the game by putting in a graduated scoring system. So that's a great way to add replayability. Doesn't work for everybody, but anybody who's real goal-driven and ambitious-focused is going to do that. Another more modern one are achievements, which are specific things that you want to do in the game. And when you get that, you get a shiny little badge, and it's yours forever, and it kind of stands as a testament to having played the game. So getting those achievements and trying to get all the achievements, something that Anne does sometimes, is a cool progressive challenge. I do achievement play a little bit, especially in games I really like and get into, because then I'm like, well, why not try the different achievements? It's a good reason to play another session, is to get some more achievements. So they're really good for getting replayability kind of artificially. It's not really about the design of the game. It's sort of metagame stuff. All right. So progressive challenges is a great way to introduce replayability. A little hard to do in a role-playing game, but you can certainly have achievements. You can also, I've seen achievements essentially be part of role-playing, even since very early days. TSR used to do these challenge adventures that were for convention play, and they had point scoring for different things that you could achieve within the adventure. So if you rescued the princess, if you defeated the Grey Golem, if you found the secret door in room 22, then you would get extra points. And so achievements and scoring have been with us from the very beginning, even in Dungeons & Dragons. All right, variety of content is number 2. This is where role-playing games always shine. Branching stories are a great way to have a variety of content. One of my favorite branching games of all time was called Age of Decadence. It's a really cool computer RPG where you can, when you start the game, and let's say you want to make a character who's a merchant, or you make a character who's a wizard's apprentice, or you make a character who's an assassin or a merchant, each of these characters is going to have a really different, especially early game experience, and could set up an entirely different end game experience as well. Middle game, all these paths tend to cross over a little bit, but at the beginning and the end, which is the bulk of the game, let's say the middle is just like the crux point rather than the bulk of what's going to happen. These are all wildly different paths. You'll have wildly different experiences. Really cool. Been playing Baldur's Gate 3. It also has amazing branching stories, although the game kind of ends up in the same conclusion and points between each chapter that you're going to have to deal with. What you actually do and how you resolve those things and how you get there and who you meet and what happens. An incredible amount of variety. It's just absolutely staggering. Makes it one of the best games of all time. So, branching story, great way for a variety of content to get replayability. Player-made content. This can be a little bit of a double-edged sword, but player-made content can simply be people make their characters in a role-playing story and decide what their characters are going to do, and that is replayable content, and it's one of the biggest sources that make tabletop role-playing games wildly dynamic and interesting every time you play them, right? So player-made content's a big deal. In computer game world, it's very hard to achieve that same effect. I would say the biggest place that you see it are mods, because people spend a lot of time crafting different options for games, even new stories and additional things. They put a lot of work into that in order to make player-made content. I think it's a little bit less effective when you're just sort of letting everybody randomly do stuff, even if they don't put a lot of thought into it, because then you can just sort of clutter up the game with a bunch of junk. And that won't feel like a variety of content. It'll feel like a lot of the same kind of junk. So you do have to be careful with that. Content updates from the developer if you have a game, and this is something you see all the time in RPGs, expansion books, new role-playing supplements. It's something that any company that wants to have their game be an ongoing concern, both for financial reasons, needs to keep putting things out, but also for the interest of players to make them come back and play the game some more. They need new stuff to play around with, new stuff to experiment with, and that's where content updates come into play. Keep a game living and keep it active. Next up, complexity of gameplay. So I was actually watching and watch a streamer. We have our computer set up. We can kind of see what's on each other's screens a little bit. We have conversations about what's going on. And so she was watching a video of a guy playing a game, and all you do is scoot around in an office chair with a bomb strapped to your chest. You don't really have a lot of options, but as I was watching it, you have complete freedom in what direction you go in. He's got a timer, so checking out different areas actually creates a kind of a complexity in the sense that you are free to go in any direction. There's not a lot that you can do, but that freedom of choice actually is quite a lot because you're exploring a big building and there's a limited timer. So there's actually kind of a lot of complexity involved in like how you steer the chair and things as I was watching it. So it made me think about this topic. So what are some ways that you can introduce complexity? Well, that's one of them. It's called degrees of freedom. So it's a question of how many implicit choices can a character make? And choices like, do I go left or right, or up or down, or forward or backward, are gameplay choices, and they do add to an element to the degrees of freedom and the complexity of playing a game. So you imagine a game like one of those jump runner games. I don't know exactly what they're called, but really all you can do is press the jump button, or like Flappy Bird, where all you can do is press the flat button, and you just move at a constant rate of speed regardless. So you have a limited degrees of freedom, which lowers the complexity of the game. The more options you give a player, the more things you can do, like a physics interaction game, for instance, have incredible degrees of freedom that you can move around in. This adds complexity and it adds replayability because people go, well, what if I went left? Well, what if I went right? What if I just try to stay at the ceiling all the time, right? Et cetera, et cetera. Allowing people to do these things is going to create replayability because they're going to come back and explore those options. Subsystems in a game. So this would be like mini games or different elements like managing your inventory, managing character builds, trying to figure out how to optimize your damage per round. Every little game mechanical lever that the player is allowed to pull the lever on or make a choice is a subsystem that adds complexity to the game and is going to increase replayability. One thing that's important to understand about complexity of gameplay is it's really going to be driven by challenges. So you have to have challenges that the complexity is going to interact with to overcome. So if you have a lot of complexity, but the game is incredibly easy and you don't need to use any of it to explore the game or to overcome the challenges that you face, then the complexity is meaningless and it won't lead to replayability. So the challenge and the complexity kind of go hand in hand in creating a situation where people are going to want to revisit and explore those complex systems in greater depth and in greater variety. So this brings us to a related idea, which is the range of strategy. And that is the number of different ways you can approach gameplay that will result in overcoming the challenges that the game offers you. So if there's only really one answer, let's say it's like a chess puzzle, and there's only one series of moves that will get you to the end of the puzzle, you do not have a range of strategy. Yes, there are different moves that you could definitely try, but in the end, you're only going to have one, and once you've achieved it, you don't need to replay it again because you've already solved the problem. You will do it the exact same way the next time. So a range of strategy means there are different ways that you can achieve success. I can power through it. I can be a stunning diplomat. I can build a horde of tiny little guys, or I can build one giant guy, et cetera, et cetera. The more range of strategy and the more asymmetric they are with one another, the more times people are going to come back to the well, even after they've finished the game and achieved success. Can they achieve success in a different way? Is it going to be more fun? Is it going to be harder? Is it going to be easier? These are the kinds of things that keep players like me engaged forever. So I think that's super important. And if you add multiplayer to a game, this is why a lot of multiplayer games are kind of a bit of a cheat or a hack in game design. Well, the players are going to interact with each other's strategy, trying to figure out which ones are most optimal in a given situation. And so you're going to have an even greater range of replayability with that kind of multiplayer stuff. It's kind of like players generating content, but they're doing it in a more natural way where they're doing it by competing with each other to lead to interesting strategic interactions. That is harder to achieve with an AI-based game or just, player versus environment kind of game. because the computer generally isn't going to have that range of innovation and ideas, or it's going to take you forever to program that range of innovation and ideas, so it's probably not worth trying. Next up, finally, we have the topic of randomization, which is a thing that a lot of people think immediately when they think of replayability, because they're going to think of a roguelike game where you have procedurally generated content and a round of randomness and how good your loot is and whether you overcome a challenge or not. And this is a big part of role-playing games, to make gameplay less predictable for the game master and for the players, and to create dynamic challenges that people need to overcome that weren't necessarily planned. So those are all good ways that randomization can definitely add to a game's replayability, but randomization can be another one of these double-edged swords that can go both ways. So let's talk a little bit about the pluses and minuses. So on the plus column, generally, randomization creates surprise outcomes, things that you hadn't seen before, and especially if you know that there's a randomized element, you might replay the game again and again. This is why gambling works, in order to see which outcome you get and to find out if you're surprised by something especially good or something especially bad. And so just that element of surprise adds content, which adds to replayability. And that's generally a good thing. Now, unfortunately, generated content can lead to a problem where, yes, everything is random, but in order to make a cohesive whole, let's say, of a random dungeon of caves, the random dungeon itself takes on its own character because it's always very similar feeling. You know, all the things have to fit together in a certain way. Certain patterns tend to repeat themselves due to the odds that are involved in the game. There's not a lot of handcrafted thought about this cave leads into this cave, leads into this cave, which creates a sense of meaning, which is something you want to explore. No, you just get a bunch of random curly passages. It's more of a chore to get through it than it is an exciting sense of discovery. And so even though it's different every time, it's the same every time. So you really have to watch out for that with randomization and generated content. Challenge variation. This can be good, and that some runs might be a little harder than others, and you play and you go, ooh, this cool thing happened and it made it a lot easier, or this crazy thing happened and it made it a lot harder and I overcame that challenge. That can be good, but it also can be a real problem because it can degrade the strategic variation. So if you have an elaborate strategy planned and you go and execute that and it all falls apart because of a bad roll, then the game becomes about whether you roll good or roll bad, and everything else you do doesn't really matter. And that's going to take away from replayability. And finally, you can use randomization as a strategy to increase the complexity of a game, because knowing that there's random elements in the game, part of the strategy becomes to overcome those random elements, or to create so that if you have a good outcome, you're ready to capitalize on that. This is kind of the strategy of life, you know. Or if you have a bad outcome, then you are ready for a contingency plan in order to deal with it. So that helps with complexity. However, again, if the randomization overcomes your planning and your strategic choices, then it completely destroys all kinds of complexity that you might have in the game, because again, you just end up ignoring it, right? So randomization can go both ways. Be very careful when using that. But always look for progressive challenges, variety of content, complexity of gameplay within reason, and a range of strategy. All right, so I think that's enough said about replayability. Let's move on to what I've been doing this week in life in general and gaming. I've been playing just a little bit of Dungeons & Dragons Online because it's been having a lot of server troubles. I was excited because we're on new servers. There's a lot more players on each server, which is good, but they're having some real technical problems. And the game varies between decent and unplayable. And since I'm not super compelled to play, it's just kind of a fun thing that I come back to from time to time. I'm going to stay away from it until they get the server troubles figured out. So I moved back over to playing a little bit of Baldur's Gate 3 for my relaxation. Just last night I got my achievement wherein I have to play a character that does not respec during the course of play and takes one level in each of the 12 classes, so that at 12th level they have one of every class. And that's the cap in the game, generally speaking. Once I've done that, I can then respec my character and make them anything I want, because I've got that achievement. There's that achievement gameplay, creating variety, in this case a literal variety, in the way my character is built. So that was pretty fun. It made for an interesting character, not a very powerful character, but a pretty versatile character, about what you would expect. I talked about it a little bit before, but it was fun to do. But I think going into the end game, I want a little bit more power. So I redid my character, still having a lot of variety, trying to keep the same tone as kind of a support spellcaster and a very defensive hero. And then I took the liberty of redoing all my other characters, which I love to do, rebuild characters, and made some real true powerhouse combo-hungry characters. Had a good time with that. Next up, let's see, Anne's Twitch channel. Let's talk about that a little bit. She finished up Siberia: The World Before, and Anne said that this was the best in the series. I kind of said, rate for me the Siberia games, like from best to worst, and which had the best puzzles, which has the best story. Overall, The World Before got a big thumbs up for having the best story, for sure. Best graphics. Brought a tear to Anne's eye towards the end because it has such a strong, good narrative story, especially after hearing what Siberia 3 was like, which has the worst story of the series, apparently. I was like, wow, that's a big step up. So that's pretty cool. Maybe doesn't have the most complicated puzzles. She said that one's a little more like a visual novel or a walking simulator, very story-focused, a little bit less puzzle-focused. In order, perhaps as an antidote to that, she's been playing Quern, Quern, or just Kern, Undying Thoughts, which is apparently almost nothing but puzzles. It was sort of a Myst-inspired game, and it's got some very deep puzzling. You solve one puzzle, you get the next puzzle, solve the next puzzle, puzzles all the way down. So that sounds pretty fun. Still playing that. Next up on the hit parade will be The Eyes of Arak, which is another puzzler story game from 2016. So tune in to the Twitch channel. Again, the links for that will be down in the show notes. If you just want to chill out and watch Anne play some clever games, and maybe you can help her solve some of the puzzles. All right, life in general. I saw Fantastic Four last weekend as kind of a birthday present, and I felt like that was a movie made just for me for my birthday. So that gave me a very special, warm, fuzzy feeling. Fantastic Four, probably my favorite comic book characters from my late childhood. So, you know, around the age of 10 or 12 or so. Apparently, I really liked The Flash when I was a little kid, but I don't remember that at all. And I'm not a huge comic book fan, but I always like the Fantastic Four. They're just kind of interesting to me. I love the teamwork aspect. I like the idea that each character is kind of specialized in a way, and that they're good friends, and they're generally nice people, and they don't have godlike powers, although I understand in the later parts of the series they do in the comic books, but I didn't really see all those. They are very powerful, though. Anyway, I love the Fantastic Four. I thought the movie was great. One of the interesting elements in it is, well, it has a bad guy in Galactus. Galactus just sort of eats planets. He's not malicious, particularly. Doesn't, you know, isn't evil in that sense. He would be from a human perspective, but from his own perspective, it's his job to eat planets. He doesn't really have a choice in these matters. He's kind of doomed to have this hunger that he must satisfy. And, you know, if you're hungry, you will eat. So nobody in the movie is like a terrible villain. There are people who are more good than other people, let's say, but I like that aspect of it. It's just cosmic forces and overcoming cool challenges. And the members of the Fantastic Four are such a close-knit family. There's like a little dinner scene early in the show where Sue announces that she's pregnant. And it's like a 2-3 minute scene. I'm not sure. It's very short, but it really gels all the characters. It gave me warm, fuzzy feelings. It made the rest of the movie I'm like, yeah, I want to see how all this turns out. It's good fun. Really liked it. Definitely worth watching, I think. I spent a lot of time in the gift shop. We'll continue to spend a lot of the time in the gift shop. I think that's going to kind of hang true until Labor Day here at the beginning of September. It's just going to be a lot of hours. And then after that, apparently all the kids go back to school. And there'll be a lot less customers and less time needed in the shop, which I'm kind of looking forward to. The extra money is good, but I really want to spend some more time designing games. Gen Con looked really cool. Saw all my friends having fun there. So that seemed really neat. I didn't get to go this year. I miss it a little bit. I mean, it's a big hassle for me to get out to the cons. But actually being at the con is a lot of fun, meeting all the fans, doing all that. So I missed that a little bit. But I hope everybody had a good time and safe journeys home. Finally, thanks to everyone for the birthday wishes over on Facebook and by email and every other way that people delivered to me. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Especially to my wife, Anne, who wrote me some poetry, gave me some lovely little gifts. I got a new wallet, which is always nice because I never buy a new wallet, and mine always end up looking completely trashed. So, you know, another 12 years, I'll need another new wallet. So I think that's it for me. I hope you guys have a great week. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.